Hi, thanks so much for coming so early in the morning. I'm really impressed, everybody. So my name's Anna. I'm an artist and a writer. My practice is based mainly in drawing, but kind of expanded drawing. So I use sculpture and embroidery and tattoos as well. I'm going to show you some of those today. But I kind of became an artist by accident. My first love was words, and I always wrote and was going to be a writer, and then went to art school and fell in love with art. So my practice still very much uses words, and I did also study creative writing. And so these different kinds of ink, I thought it made a lot of sense to talk about the way that they come together in my work. The picture on the screen is a stick and poke tattoo that I did on my friend Lisa Max, who's also a really great illustrator. And I will show you some more of those. But first of all, I thought I would show this is a project not by me, by an artist called Shelley Jackson, which is quite a formative project, or quite an influential project for me. This project, Skin, Shelley Jackson is a writer and an artist, and Skin was a project where she wrote a short story about 1,800 words, and did a call out for volunteers to get it tattooed, to get a word each tattooed onto them. And the story itself is not being published in any other form. It's published by being tattooed onto the words of 1,800 people. And out of that has sprung up this amazing community of people trying to find the other people in their sentence. Because when I say it hasn't been published, each person who has a tattoo is sent the full copy, the full text, but nobody else gets to read it. And so people trying to find the other people in their sentence, or trying to find all the other people with the same word as them, communities springing up online, and that kind of really beautiful connectivity, and also the embodiment of words in people was something that I found really beautiful, as well as stories and art interconnecting, something that I've always been really interested in my practice. That project's still going. I don't think all of the people have been tattooed yet. So when I went to art school, one of the first things that I found that I really connected with was zines, and I started making zines, which are self-published magazines, usually photocopied, usually quite lo-fi. They've got a long history going back to the 1930s, when sci-fi readers started sending each other handmade magazines of sci-fi fan fiction or things like that. So putting together text with art in a really tactile way is something that's run through my practice. Sorry, it's dry. I started using this motif with the hands in about 2010, 2011, and the tactility and the idea of reaching out, of not quite being able to touch, of representing language without using language, was something that really interested me. And that led to a show called Notes Toward a Universal Language, and that's a drawing from the show, which is one of three. I use a lot of this kind of mark making, and in this exhibition it came to represent language in a way that I was trying to make a language without words, and trying to represent the connections between people, and the way that you can't ever properly connect with another person, even if you speak the same language. You can't fully cross that barrier, and so trying to bridge that has become something that that has run through my practice. I guess with that has come an interest in surfaces and in using different surfaces and in using tactility to represent connection. This is an object made out of air dry clay, which is a really obviously tactile medium, and something that I started using really kind of crudely, making small forms, things that just fit in your hands, things to represent touch without touching. The other thing about surfaces is that I've always been really interested in the edges, finding the edges of the body, which I think is from a personal feeling of sometimes feeling disconnected from my own body in states of anxiety and things like that, and being really aware of needing to know my physical limits and where the edges are, and so that's something that comes in with the tattooing stuff, I think. So that was a larger installation there. And I began using embroidery, and a lot of the techniques that I've been using are really repetitive, and I think as well as being tactile, they also physically connect you with things repeatedly. So embroidery, like the clay work, a little bit less so. And making embroideries that were not figurative, that were really intuitive and gestural, kind of like the drawings that I was doing. And so after a while, the linen, I started to feel represented skin and represented the piercing of the surface of the skin. And so using embroidery and using clay as well. So that's air dry clay that's been embroidered into while it's still wet and then dried. So I began making a body of work using that, which is kind of ongoing. And I also started using tattoos. So I got into tattoo from the internet, I guess. Just researching DIY tattoo, and I'll show you some examples later of other tattoos that other people have done. Stick and poke is a technique that doesn't use a machine. So you use tattoo needles and ink, or sometimes you use a pencil with a sewing needle and like Indian ink, but that's not like recommended, but it can be done. And so I was really interested in the DIY nature of the DIY nature of something that's become quite clinical and surrounded by health codes and all that sort of thing, but that actually for a lot of history hasn't been. And I'm going to do a brief history of tattoo later. But yeah, so I started doing tattoo just for fun, and then realised how much it connected with my practice with this embroidery that I've been doing, which also I just started doing for fun. I think I find sometimes, or not even for fun, actually more like a coping strategy, doing a repetitive task. And often I think that's how things become part of my practice, but then they become something more. So this use of tattooing and wanting again to make things that weren't figurative, but that were like the drawings that I'd been doing. It was also about connecting with people, because when you're tattooing somebody, it's a really intimate experience. You might not know somebody very well, but you are holding their skin, you're kind of right up close in their grill, you are there. It's a really slow process, so it takes, like this one with Melissa was one of the first, I think was the first scribbly one that I did. And that took like 3 hours. And so you need to, that's a lot of time to spend with somebody one-on-one. And so I'm really interested in that. That project, those three aspects of the project, the embroidery, the clay, the tattooing, came together in this, in an artist book that I made for an exhibition last year called Stay Keep, which was at Paper Mountain. And I'm just going to read this text to you. The edges of your body look like they're made of skin, but they might be glass or smoke. They drift in and out on their own tides. To anchor the edges of your body, take a needle and thread. Poke the needle under your skin. Pull the thread through. Make your stitches small and close together. Start at the feet and work upwards, continuing in this way. This thread in your skin will be a firm hold, a point of reference, a boundary for what's inside you. It will take a long time, but it isn't difficult. Just in and out, like breathing. This work was in a light locker in Grand Lane, and I wrote the work. I wrote the piece for that and made it into a drawing, and then later on I reused it because it didn't feel finished, and it felt like it connected a lot with the other work that I'd been doing, even though I didn't pull them all together at the time of writing it. So I used it in this artist book, A Short Lesson in Embroidery, and that was an edition of 40. They were hand bound and the covers were all different, using air dry clay to make the cover really tactile, using tracing paper for the text, so that idea of layers of different levels, the kind of piercing of layers became something that was experienced while reading it. I'm going to digress now into a brief history of tattoo, which is something that I really like to talk about. I hope it's not too early for this. The first ancient frozen corpse is Ötzi the Iceman, my favourite frozen corpse of all. Ötzi, if you don't know, was found in the 1990s. He was a Copper Age man who was found with all his clothes, all his belongings, a pouch of like medicines from local plants. He has the earliest known pair of trousers, which is pretty cool. And he also has a lot of tattoos, about 50 all up. And you can see them there. They're quite simple, quite rudimentary. There's lines, they're just lines and dots. And they're on places that scientists have realised he would have had inflammation or arthritis based on analysing his joints and bones. So which is quite interesting and suggests that they might have been either to mark sites for like pressure or some kind of acupuncture, or that they were more mysterious, more about warding off. This is another pretty great frozen corpse. I'm sorry I know it's quite early. But this is a princess, so-called. She was found in Siberia alongside a couple of warriors, also with some tattoos, but hers were the best. And I think hers are really interesting because even though they're 2,500 years old, I should say, by the way, Ötzi is older than Stonehenge. Like, it's pretty impressive for the earliest tattoos. But this is more recent, but still very old. And on the right is an artist's replication of what the tattoo on her arm would have looked like. They're these amazing chimeras. That's a recreation of all over her body. There are a lot of pretty amazing similarities to tattoos that people get today. And they're just really beautiful images in their own right, and obviously for decoration. And she was very high ranking.
Do we know how the tattoo were made at that time?
I have some tools later that I will show you in a later slide. Yeah. But I mean, techniques have differed across the world and throughout history, but this is another one from Peru. Some pretty great knuckle tats. The tradition of Russian prison tattoos is something that's really interesting to me. Again, using materials at hand, really DIY, but some really incredibly beautiful and detailed images, and also with a really rich symbolic history that kind of tells stories of people's lives and their rank within the prison, and you know, all kinds of really amazing things that really go beyond just being decoration or just being, yeah, just being, I don't know, whatever they are. Tattoo has a rich history all over the world. The West found it, came to it through the Pacific Islands, but all over Africa and Asia and Europe, people have been tattooing for centuries. There's just a couple of women from North Africa. There's thousands of other examples. And it's really interesting how prevalent facial tattoos are in a really wide variety of cultures, often for beauty, sometimes for ritual, sometimes for religious reasons, sometimes just because they look amazing and people want to look amazing. And it's funny how different cultures feel about that kind of thing, about people with facial tattoos or about, yeah. So these are some ancient bronze tattooing implements. Now, I don't know exactly what the tattoos of Ötzi and the Siberian princess would have been, but probably something pretty similar to these. Tiny needles, slightly bigger needles. They look pretty painful, to be honest. Ink that was often made from soot and mixed with some kind of, suspended in some kind of liquid, something to bind it together, or sometimes just rubbed in. These are contemporary stick and poke materials. The pencil with the sewing needle, yeah, not super hygienic. The sterilised single-use tattoo needles, what I use.
So would you use that sterilised single-use just like on one session?
Yeah.
The entire session?
Yeah.
Between colours?
I would probably change between colours or sometimes just try and clean it really thoroughly, but it would, yeah, it depends, but you can, yeah. These are some contemporary stick and pokes from one of my favourite websites, fyeahstickandpoke.tumblr.com. Write it down, people. Some amazing examples. The one on the left, Louis and Harry, apparently they're from One Direction. That's one of my favourites. And I really, really like, I genuinely really, really like these tattoos. I know that compared to what is considered good tattoo, these are really terrible. But I really love the roughness of them and the fact that people did them on their friends and that people did them on themselves with the skills that they had and the materials they had. There's something really beautiful about marking your skin or marking someone else's skin in a way that lasts, and that is just something that you have done. These are some contemporary tattoo artists that I love, some working with stick and poke, often working in other mediums as well, drawing and illustration, but that really show the amazing things you can do. So this is an artist called No Scribbles. Miso is an illustrator who looks a lot at geography and cosmology and cosmography, rather. Is that a word? Anyway, the sky, stars, and making beautiful tattoos on people. Her practice is to tattoo people in a barter system, so instead of taking money, also making an alternate economy out of tattooing, which I really like as well. My personal favourite, HTML Flowers, who I was lucky enough to be tattooed by in Melbourne recently. This is Hans. I like Hans a lot, but this one of the witches is one of my favourite ever tattoos probably that exists. The intricacy of line and the thinness of line is something that you can achieve with stick and poke because it's so slow. You're just using one needle, and it's yeah, it's really time consuming, but it's really beautiful. This is another artist, not using stick and poke, but who is relevant to my practice. Some of these slides have page numbers on them for some reason, which I didn't do, but anyway. She's someone I discovered after I started doing kind of scribbly drawing type tattoos, who, yeah, as you can see, is working with abstraction. I think she initially trained as a painter, and bringing that back into tattoo is something that's pretty amazing and pretty unique. Though, yeah, those, as I said, aren't stick and poke. They're using guns and shading and things like that. But yeah, I think they're super beautiful. Oh, this is another project. So I thought I would just bring it back, circling back to work that I'm doing. So in terms of thinking about communication and connectivity, something that I've been doing recently is collaborating with Renee Coles, who's sitting in the front row, and we've been collaborating with Snapchat. And this is not using tattooing, but it is about, or it has been a lot about, yeah, communication and language, I think, in a way. So we did this project in Fremantle, the Fremantle Arts Centre last year. We did a residency. We made these two boats. They're called coracles. We made them because we were interested in learning traditional handicrafts, things that we didn't know how to do, things that our art degrees hadn't taught us, life skills that we did not possess. And we decided to make these two coracles because we also wanted to pursue adventure and survival, which was something that we researched quite a lot. That's them from the back. They're made of marine ply and linen and covered in bituminous paint, like bitumen paint, to seal them, and then we painted them on top. The coracle is quite an ancient boat, used all over the world, from Ireland to Vietnam, and so we made these and embarked on a performance to launch them. And in the performance, it was a very small audience of about 15 people, and they each had very specific roles. It was really participatory work out in the river in Fremantle. And we made a system of flags that in our boats we would communicate to the people on shore as we got further and further away by waving specific flags, which meant that they had to do specific tasks and respond to us. They had to light a fire. There was a drum beat, and at one stage everybody had to do the drum beat and then drum wildly and yell. And I'm talking about that project because again, it comes back to this connection with people and this reaching out and the yelling as we got further and further away. We couldn't hear it anymore in the end, and then everybody stopped and left. And I felt like that was a good project to end on because it's quite different to the previous things. But I just wanted to mention it because, yeah, I felt like it tied back in together. And that's the end of my presentation. Oh no, that's the final installation. We made a 5-channel video work. I feel like I had more points to say about that, but I can't remember. That is the end. Does anyone have any questions? Or I don't know if we're doing questions. The first question that I'll answer is, does it hurt? The answer is yes, but not as much as you would think. I think stick and poke is, well, getting tattooed hurts because you're piercing the skin repetitively. But stick and poke is, I think, although it takes longer, which is a downside, it's also kind of more gentle than machine tattoo. It usually doesn't bleed, whereas often tattoos with a machine do bleed. So yeah, I don't know, it hurts, but it's
bearable and, I don't know, potentially worth it. Another question was, what do you think of today's prevalence of tattoos just for fashion? I think they're great. I don't feel like I want to like judge people for the reasons they get tattoos, and I don't really think tattoos necessarily have to have something that's like super deep and meaningful. It can just be something awesome and funny. And I think a lot of stick and pokes in particular are like, there's a lot of stick and pokes of like pizza slices and coffee cups and funny slogans, and they're not necessarily super deep or inspirational, but I think that they're just really nice expressions of the things that people like. And a lot of and also the kinds of tattoo, I guess the tattoo artists that I show, the contemporary people, I feel like most of their drawings are, I guess, just for fashion, or they're just for having a really beautiful piece of art on your body, which is something really nice. And the last question is, do you think there's a relation between permanence of ink and the transience of experience or life? Transience of experience. Was this yours? No. Okay. But the transience of life is what I assume asking about, and I think that's a really good point, and I think it is. The tattoos are both really permanent and really ephemeral. People get tattooed and then they die, and then the tattoos aren't there anymore. A friend of mine who I learned to tattoo with died a couple of months ago, and we tattooed each other, and now those tattoos aren't there anymore, and that's sad, obviously, but also I think the fact that people see them as being this like super permanent thing is not true. They are ephemeral, and there's that interesting duality that I'm really interested in. The skin being both permanent and really fleeting. So yeah, I thought that was a good question.